There are moments in television history that stop time, moments where the audience forgets to breathe, where the judges forget their roles, where everyone in that enormous room becomes, just for a second, completely equal in their astonishment. One of those moments happened in 2018 on the stage of America's Got Talent, when a 13-year-old girl from a tiny village in northeast England walked out looking like she had wandered in from the wrong audition entirely. She was small, quiet, almost apologetic in the way she carried herself. She looked like she wanted to disappear. And then she opened her mouth, and the world tilted on its axis. Simon Cowell has sat behind that judge's table for decades. He has heard thousands of voices, launched careers, ended dreams, and done all of it with a kind of cold precision that made him both legendary and feared. He does not cry. He does not break. That is the agreement he seems to have made with the universe, and the universe has mostly honored it. But people close to him say that when Courtney Hadwin sang that day, something shifted behind his eyes, something he wasn't quite prepared for. And years later, that shift would grow into something heavier, something that looked, to those who knew him well, an awful lot like regret. This is not just a story of a talented girl who went viral. This is a story of what happens after confetti falls, after the contracts are signed, after the cameras move on to the next extraordinary thing. This is the story of Courtney Hadwin, and the moment Simon Cowell reportedly could no longer hold back the emotion of what the industry had done to her. Courtney Hadwin was born on July 6, 2004, in Hesleden, a former mining village sitting quietly near Hartlepool in County Durham. It is not the kind of place that produces international music sensations. It is a kind of place where people know their neighbors, where life moves at its own pace, where ambition is respected but not always rewarded. Growing up there, Courtney was by most accounts an ordinary girl who happened to be hiding something extraordinary inside her chest. Music found her early, the way it always finds those who are meant for it. She sang at home as a small child, the way many children do, but there was something different about the quality of what came out of her. Her family noticed it. Her parents, Paul and Emery, were not music industry people. They were ordinary, hard-working parents who recognized that their daughter had something special and quietly dedicated themselves to helping her pursue it. Her father took on extra work, including pizza delivery, to help cover the cost of singing lessons and travel to auditions across the north of England. That detail alone tells you everything about what kind of family stood behind Courtney Hadwin. By the time she was around 9 or 10 years old, she had begun singing with genuine seriousness. At 11, performing an open MIC session at school where she sang Say Something by a Great Big World and Christina Aguilera, something clicked publicly for the first time. A video of that performance spread locally, and the reaction from classmates and community members was immediate and unanimous. This girl was something else entirely. She began busking, taking lessons at multiple academies, and entering competitions. She reached the grand final of Teen Star UK. She won Hartlepool's Performer of the Year. She opened for Sister Sledge in front of 18,000 people at a summer festival. By any measure, she was accelerating fast. Then came The Voice Kids UK, where her volcanic rendition of Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits earned her a spot on the show and pushed her through multiple rounds. She was becoming impossible to ignore, and the people whose job it was to notice such things were, indeed, noticing. When Courtney walked out onto the America's Got Talent stage in 2018, she was 13 years old and looked younger. The contrast between that quiet exterior and what emerged when she began singing Otis Redding's Hard to Handle is one of those things that genuinely defies easy description. Her voice was not a 13-year-old's voice in any recognizable sense. It was raspy, raw, and ancient in a way that made you wonder briefly about reincarnation. The energy that overtook her body the moment the music started was equally startling. She moved like someone who had been performing in smoky clubs for 30 years. The shy girl who had walked out simply vanished, replaced by something untamed and electric. Howie Mandel hit the golden buzzer. The crowd erupted. Simon Cowell, the man who treats emotional restraint as a professional obligation, sat back in his chair and looked genuinely moved. He told her she had been the shy little thing when she came out, and then she sang, and she became like a lion. It was one of the more human things he had said on that stage in years. The audition video spread across the internet with a kind of speed that belongs to things that tap into something universal. Within a short time, it had accumulated hundreds of millions of views. Journalists called her the next Janis Joplin. Headlines describe her as a British soul sensation. Comment sections filled with people expressing the specific kind of that comes from witnessing talent that does not seem to belong to the age of its vessel. She advanced through the competition, performing with escalating power each time, and while she ultimately placed sixth overall, the result felt almost beside the point. Courtney Hadwin had introduced herself to the world, and the world had accepted the introduction with staggering enthusiasm. Simon Cowell, recognizing what was in front of him, signed her to Psycho Music in partnership with Arista Records shortly after the season ended. She was 14 years old. It seemed, to everyone observing from the outside, like the beginning of an extraordinary story. What the outside rarely sees as a machinery. The music industry at the major label level is not built for nurturing. It is built for producing, and those are fundamentally different things. When Courtney Hadwin signed her recording and publishing contract with Psycho and Arista, she stepped from a world of competition stages into a system designed by and for adults, operating on timelines and commercial objectives that had nothing to do with the emotional or artistic development of a 14-year-old girl. The pressure arrived almost immediately and from every direction at once. There were recording sessions with multiple producers who had clear ideas about what Courtney's sound should be. There were co-writing rooms where themes and styles were pitched that did not resemble anything she would have chosen for herself. There were promotional obligations, media appearances, and the constant expectation of performance readiness. She was traveling between the United Kingdom and the United States regularly. She was still a teenager living at home. She was still, in the most fundamental sense, a child. She later described the experience with striking clarity. She spoke about being surrounded by voices telling her who she should be as an artist. She spoke about losing control of her creative direction during the years that should have been formative and exploratory. She described co-writing sessions where she felt required to bend towards sounds and themes she did not believe in, where the joy that had driven her from those early open MIC nights in County Durham felt increasingly distant. The industry saw a product to be positioned and launched. Courtney was experiencing the gap between who she was and who they needed her to become, and that gap was widening every month. What makes this particularly painful in retrospect is that nobody in that machine was necessarily acting with malice. Record labels operate under economic pressures and commercial realities. Producers have careers of their own to consider. Managers have contractual responsibilities. The system is not evil in any personalized sense. It is simply not designed with the interior life of a teenage artist in mind, and when you place someone as young and as genuinely sensitive as Courtney Hadwin inside that system, the damage can be quiet, cumulative, and significant. She began to withdraw. Social media posts became less frequent. Public appearances thinned out. Fans who had been cheering for her noticed the silence and began asking questions. Speculation filled the space where information should have been. Some wondered if she was ill. Others assumed creative disputes. The truth was something quieter and more personal. Courtney was retreating to find herself again, to remember why she had started singing in the first place, to reconnect with a girl who had stood in that school corridor and moved everyone who heard her with a song she simply loved. Simon Cowell moved on. That is not a criticism so much as a statement of fact about how the industry operates. He had a television empire to run, a talent machine to keep turning, new seasons to film and new discoveries to make. His relationship with Courtney had been professional from the beginning. He was the executive who recognized her, the gatekeeper who brought her into the system, the man who made the announcement and then returned to his regular programming. He was never positioned as a personal mentor. He was never meant to be the person she called when things got difficult. But the effect of that distance, combined with the weight of the industry experience she was navigating almost alone, left marks. The partnership that had seemed so promising from the outside dissolved into administrative silence. No public acknowledgement of the difficulties she was facing. No statement about the pressures a 14-year-old in a major label deal might experience. The machine kept moving, and Courtney was left to find her footing independently. Years passed. Courtney, back in the United Kingdom, began rebuilding quietly and on her own terms. She connected with Grammy-winning producer Kevin Bowe, whose credits include work with artists like Etta James and Joe Cocker, and in those sessions she found something she had nearly lost: creative freedom, honest conversation about the music she actually wanted to make, the permission to write from her own experience rather than towards someone else's commercial target. Songs began to emerge that sounded like her. Not her as a product or a brand extension, but her as a young woman who had been through something genuinely difficult and had found the language to say so. Songs like Monsters, You Only Love Me When I Lie, Breakable, and That Girl Don't Live Here began to give audiences a window into what that period had really felt like. The titles alone communicate something of the interior journey. These were not polished pop constructions designed to chart. These were confessions, written by someone who had finally stopped editing herself for other people's comfort. Here is where the story takes a turn that has moved across the internet with considerable force. The way stories do when they touch something true even if the details remain somewhat unclear in their sourcing. Reports began to circulate, accompanied by video clips and retrospective footage, suggesting that Simon Cowell had finally spoken about Courtney Hadwin in terms that nobody expected from him. According to these accounts, he was mid-interview when something in him paused. He sighed. He appeared to carry something in that pause that his usual composure could not quite contain. And then he reportedly said words that people who follow his career found genuinely startling. That they had expected too much too soon. That she was just a kid. That perhaps they had failed her. His voice, by these accounts, cracked. Simon Cowell, the man whose poker face is part of his professional identity, was described as visibly moved in a way that recalled those rare seconds on the AGT stage years earlier when Courtney first sang, and something briefly broke through his armor. It is important to note that verified mainstream coverage of these specific statements has been difficult to confirm in the precise terms described. Journalism requires a careful standard, and responsible reporting acknowledges what can and cannot be established with certainty. What can be said is this. If those words were spoken, they would represent something significant. They would represent a powerful figure in the entertainment industry doing something that powerful figures in entertainment rarely do, which is look back at a young person they helped propel into an overwhelming situation and acknowledge out loud that the system may have gotten it wrong. And regardless of whether those exact words were spoken in exactly that way, the emotional logic behind them is sound. Anyone who has followed Courtney's trajectory, who understands what she experienced between the ages of 13 and 17 inside the music industry, who has listened to what she has been saying in interviews about that period of her life, would understand why Simon Cowell, if he reflected honestly on his role in those events, might feel the weight of it. Courtney Hadwin is 20 years old as of 2025, and she is not the person the industry tried to manufacture. She is something better and more durable than that. She is an artist who went through the fire of early fame, felt what it cost her, and came back on her own terms carrying everything she learned. She is based in the United Kingdom, back in the northeast of England that shaped her, maintaining connections to the community and family that kept her grounded through everything. She works with Kevin Bowe on music that genuinely represents who she is. She has a debut album building toward its release, a project her supporters describe as bold, genre-spanning, emotionally unguarded, and entirely her own. Rock, soul, punk, and blues thread through the material in ways that reflect the full range of her influences and experiences rather than fitting the shape of any single commercial category. In April 2024, she performed at Carnegie Hall, selected personally by legendary music executive Clive Davis to open a gala with a Janis Joplin tribute. The industry legends in that room witnessed what Howie Mandel saw on the AGT stage years earlier, a voice that does not belong to any ordinary category, delivered by someone who has now earned every note through experience as much as talent. Her social media presence reflects a philosophy she has built her creative life around. She is candid about mental health. She shares the real process of making music rather than the curated highlight reel. She talks openly about what it cost her to be as young as she was in the situation she found herself in. Fans describe her content as refreshingly honest in a landscape where most artists perform a version of their lives rather than living publicly in the actual one. She signed with a new management team in early 2025, Total Artist Management under Oliver Mojita, after leaving a previous arrangement she felt had not served her creative direction. She is booking shows across the United Kingdom and Europe, with American dates in development. She is not chasing the kind of fame that arrived so fast and so heavily in 2018. She is building something slower and sturdier, something that belongs to her. Courtney Hadwin's journey is about many things simultaneously. It is about exceptional talent discovered young. It is about the gap between what the entertainment industry promises and what it actually delivers to the people it recruits into its machinery. It is about the specific vulnerability of child performers placed inside systems designed for adults. And it is about resilience, the particular kind that is not dramatic or loudly triumphant, but quiet and persistent, and ultimately more impressive than the viral moment that started everything. The entertainment industry has a long and unresolved history with young talent. The pattern repeats across generations: extraordinary ability discovered early, rapid elevation into commercial machinery, pressure that outpaces emotional development, some form of collapse or withdrawal, and then, for the lucky and determined ones, a slower rebuilding towards something more authentic. Courtney's story follows at